We know that you come here for different purposes, to find community or to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, and to find comfort, and perhaps to find the answers to some of your bigger questions. Whatever your reason, we welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, and love here. And we hope you'll find ways to provide outreach to others in our congregation and in our local community as we go through these troubling times. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tampa. We gather this hour of people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning in celebration of the life that we share together.
Well, good morning to all of you. I'm delighted once again to be here with you, to talk to you rather about something that I'm actually trying to be. Sometimes when I look out at the political landscape, my mind starts turning, and it doesn't quite comprehend the larger picture. We all sometimes lose sight of the larger picture, and we get focused in on the subtitles, and we process that. But then we have to bring ourselves back to perspective and look at it from the larger viewpoint, which is something that our species sometimes doesn't do very well. We're a species, and we're a wonderful species. We beat ourselves up so much that it's hard for us to believe that we just can't, when we look around, and especially when it's somebody else. Like, well, I'm doing okay, but that over there, boy, I don't know about that. And I think we have to remind ourselves that nothing is right or wrong except what we label as right and wrong. And from the perspective or from the frame of reference that individual has, nothing he or she might be considered right or might be considered wrong at all. And that's the bridge to understanding. I think there's an Indian proverb that says, never criticize a man or a woman unless you've walked at least 1 mile in their moccasins. And empathy is a key to understanding. It's looking at even those individuals we consider to be the extreme opposite of ourselves and taking a breath and a moment to say, what is it that might drive that person to feel and act a certain way? I think that's the beginning of us beginning to understand each other. And I remember a scene from the story of Jackie Robinson when this movie that was done about him, when he entered the major leagues. There was a pitcher who threw the ball and hit him, and he looked out at him and said, "What are you afraid of?" And I think sometimes it would do us good, and I apply this to myself, to ask ourselves not so much, what makes that person such a bad person? It might be that we may ask ourselves, what are they afraid of? What fear is driving this person to behave that way and to do these things? And so this morning I want to talk about what I call idea heroes. Idea heroes are those individuals who have helped to impact our world for positive change and progress in various fields of endeavor. Einstein, who said, everything on earth and in the heavens is composed of energy, compacted together molecules, electrons, protons, atoms, the twirling energy, and you can break that energy apart and create destructive things with it. And out of this comes the atom bomb. He came up with the formula E equals mc squared, which is a foundational principle of physics, biology, science, because he said there's more to this than what we see at present. There's more to this. And he went beneath the surface. Galileo said to the people of his day, the organized church, our existence is not the pivotal point of the universe. As a matter of fact, it's not even the pivotal point of our solar system. The solar system is heliocentric, not geocentric. And Galileo, as a result of that, was rewarded with house arrest for the rest of his life. And it wasn't until sometime in the late 1980s that the Catholic Church decided we were wrong. And one of the popes apologized for what they did to him. He was an idea hero. He was someone who made a difference in scientific inquiry. He was someone that helped us to understand that there's more to this physical universe than this little tiny dot we call Earth. There's much more to it. I was looking at a broad picture of our galaxy, and it was just a snapshot. And in the snapshot, you could not even see the Earth. It was virtually invisible. It was that small. There were so many other bodies in this picture. And that is not to minimize our value and to downgrade our existence. It's just to remind us, hey, you're one tiny dot in the midst of a kind of universal ocean where there are trillions of other dots. And we have to reflect on the historical track and remind ourselves that at one time, even on this tiny dot, there were people who said it's flat. You can fall off the edge if you go too far out. And Europe, Asia, and Africa is pretty much all there is. They didn't even realize there was North and South America. And so when Columbus and the other European explorers came to this part of the world, again, the organized church and the status quo said, hey, you're rocking the boat here. You're messing with stuff. Where did these people come from? Columbus, when he encountered them, thought they were a part of the Indian population. That's where they get that name from. He thought he was in India or in East India. He thought he had found a new trade route to get that silk and other things that they liked in Europe. And what he had actually bumped into, because others were there already, he didn't discover it, he bumped into it. And he said, oh, these must be Indians. And they were not. They were a whole lot different in many ways. And so when we reflect on that, we have to also consider that maybe we don't know everything there is to know about ourselves and about our existence. maybe this fledgling species, and for those of you who may not use that word, it means embryonic, babies. Maybe our fledgling species is just beginning to scratch the surface of something that is much, much, much larger. Rosalind Franklin and her work in X-ray fraction facilitated James Watson and Francis Crick in developing their model of DNA. At one time, we did not even know DNA existed. We didn't know anything about zygotes and gametes and how each of us has inside us a kind of DNA map. And I think it's almost, if you would stretch it from one end to the other, I think you could wrap it around the earth. Can you imagine that? But this woman delved into this because she decided there's more to this than meets the eye. There's more to this than we might consider. And she was able to help us begin to understand DNA. A woman. And can you imagine how she was treated? Well, it should come as no surprise that the men downgraded and minimized her contribution, but the facts have a way of coming out. And so now we understand that had it not been for her work, they would not have been able to do their work. She was an idea hero. Eleanor Roosevelt said to a nation that was within the throes of apartheid and segregation and had primitive ideas, limited ideas about African Americans when they were training black men to fly airplanes during World War II. Most of the public, and particularly the white public, said, oh, black people can't fly airplanes. They're good for working in the kitchen and picking cotton and all that kind of stuff. And maybe every now and then one of them escapes and does something extraordinary, but he's a strange being out of that batch. But she said, I'll fly with them. Here was the First Lady of the United States saying, I'll get on a plane. Guess what? They took off and landed safely. And that informed some other people, well, maybe they can fly airplanes. And I think they were called, that unit that came out of that Tuskegee training, they were called Red Wings, something with red in it. And it got to the point where when they were combat missions, many of the bigger planes that were flown by white pilots said, we won't go into battle without somebody from this group being one of the fighter groups. So they expanded their consciousness, but it took Eleanor Roosevelt to be an idea hero and say, I don't buy it. And I'm going to get on a plane with one of these black pilots. And he took off and landed safely. Jesus of Nazareth came along 2,000 years ago. An itinerant preacher from a city called Nazareth. And it's recorded that one of the stories that was told that when Jesus came out of Nazareth and started preaching, somebody said, can anything good come out of Nazareth? And Nathanael, I believe, is the one who said, come and see. And at a time when the Jewish population was expecting some king to return and establish their kingdom on Mount Zion and from there rule the world, they were looking for some kind of earthly king to come with a powerful domain and rule the earth and slay their enemies and get rid of all their adversaries. And Jesus comes along and says, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Pray for them that despitefully use you. Give and seek nothing in return. And there were people who said, well, what kind of Jewish priest is this? Here we are in Roman captivity, and he's saying if somebody compels you to go 1 mile, go 2. And what they didn't understand with this idea hero was that he was saying we have to change the paradigm. We keep doing the same repetitive things. We've had rebellions. There were men who rose up to fight the Romans and were not able to break the yoke that way. And so Jesus came along and said, we've got to change our view and we've got to change our behaviors. And somewhere this senseless chain of violence must come to an end. And so he said, you change the paradigm by changing the way you grapple with it and transform the situation, not just for the moment, but for a kind of transitional shift that will create a positive outcome for all of us. Mahatma Gandhi, born under British domination, went to South Africa and got thrown off a train. And he decided, we have to do something about this. And there were many in India who wanted to take up arms and fight the British. They're our oppressors, let's destroy them. And Gandhi said, there is no more powerful force in all of existence than truth. Satyagraha, he called it. And he said, nonviolence, disciplined nonviolence is the way to go. And through his civil disobedience campaigns and his nonviolent crusades, when he went to England, the people loved him. He was popular in England. Here's a guy who is breaking the yoke of British domination, and when he went to England, the people cheered him. Because Gandhi said, there's something larger at work here than just British compulsion and British control. There is a mindset that must be broken. And he was able to win independence for the Indian people. Martin Luther King Jr., at a time in this country where our cities were on the verge of going up in smoke, where segregation and blatant discrimination had been around for almost 300 years. And there were many black leaders who said, we need to do the same thing that the white man did. We need to get violent, get arms, and break this yoke. And Dr. King said, no, there's another way. He said, there's a way as old as the insights of Jesus of Nazareth and as modern as the techniques of Mohandas K. Gandhi. Turn the other cheek, he said, for he who lives by the sword shall perish by the sword. And he went on to say, non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation, in the words of Thoreau, as is cooperation with good. And was able to make great strides in this country. And when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, 75% of the American public thought of him in negative terms. But today, 90% say that he was a great man who contributed constructively to our development as a nation. Because Dr. King said, I know that this is problematic. And he went into this articulation of the three Greek words that represent love in one of his speeches. He said the Greeks have three words to represent love: eros, philia, and agape. And he talked about eros, which is romantic love, and he talked about philia, which is friendship love. The city of Philadelphia is supposed to be the city of brotherly love. And then he talked about agape. And he said agape is a kind of love that seeks nothing in return. And with this kind of love operating in our hearts, we love men not because we like them, not because they're our friends, but because God loves them. And he said this kind of love will transform our society, and even went on to say if physical death is the price we must pay to deliver our white brothers and sisters from an eternal spiritual death, nothing could be more redemptive. And he told the nation and the world about a dream, and we've been talking about it ever since. He was an idea hero. These are a few examples of individuals who have been willing to step aside or outside the conventional box, the traditional viewpoint, the normative rules, the widely accepted assertions, the status quo, and as a result have brought us bold new insights, inventions, and advancements that have shaped our present world. They were willing to say that perhaps there is more to our existence and our understanding of the world than our present knowledge. There may be something else to grasp and make a part of our experience. One of my favorite Shakespeare quotes, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophies. There's something outside the parameters of what you presently know and understand. You'll remember the Star Trek theme. Are there any Trekkies in the house? I love to hear, I don't know if it was the voice of Gene Roddenberry or some other narrator who would say, as the show would come on, I'm a Trekkie. I never attended the conventions or anything, but I'm a Trekkie. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. And do you know that this series, which became one of the most popular science fiction series in the history of our nation, the original series captivated millions for 3 years, and then there have been multiple subsequent movies. It has become a cultural icon. Gene Roddenberry, the writer and executive producer, stimulated our imaginations and entertained us in a bold new way. He also made the bold move of casting an African-American woman as one of the lead officers on the spaceship. He cast Nichelle Nichols as Lieutenant Nyota Uhura. If we think Barack Obama was a different kind of name, an American who made history in his own right by becoming President of the United States not once but twice, with the theme, Yes, We Can, one of the youngest at the age of 47. These are all examples of individuals who were willing to step aside the comfort zone, to venture out, to make great discoveries and powerful achievements. This morning, I want to focus briefly. My sermons tend to be rather elongated. On one area that does not always get challenged as much as others. I want to talk about heroship as it relates to our theological frameworks, as it relates to our notions of our cause, our source, our God. Do you know there are over 4,000 religions on this planet that are known religions? with each of them having multiple variations in doctrines and practices within each framework. In the United States, we have 5 major religions in the numerical sense: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. Even if you don't subscribe to any of these or consider yourself to be a humanist or an agnostic or atheist, they have an overarching impact on the way we live. Our ideas about life and the source of life are governed by our beliefs, and much of that belief system is shaped by the religions of the world. Even if you're an atheist, you can't be an atheist outside the context of a theist. You can't. It's a relative term. You can't be out where there is no in. So you're impacted. Whether we like it or not, we're impacted by those things around us. I'm going to make a bold statement, and it is that I have come to believe that our theological assertions are based almost entirely on the ideas that were given to us by our predecessors. And for any number of reasons, we cling tenaciously to these ideas because we see them as too sacred to question or to touch in any way differently. We've been taught that in this area, by our various persuasions, that there's no need for too much speculation, and it would be an act of heresy to suggest that changes are in order. I'd like to quote Dr. King again at this point. Yes, we've learned to fly the air like birds and swim the sea like fish, yet we haven't learned to walk together on earth as sisters and brothers. Through our scientific and technological genius, we've made of the world a neighborhood. Now, through our spiritual and moral genius, we must make of it a brotherhood or sisterhood. I would like to suggest to you that the reason we've advanced in science and technology is because we have had what my mentor Neil Donald Walsh calls idea heroes. We've had people who said there's more to math than addition and subtraction. We've had individuals who have said there are microorganisms that impact our physical life. And do you know that those people were laughed at and sometimes called crazy? And there was one woman, I can't think of her name right now, who was actually placed in a sanitarium because they said she's crazy. And later on, they had to applaud her. Because we're a species that evolves slowly. And even sadder than that, we tend to think that Einstein probably was not right when he said to do the same thing over and over again and look for a different outcome is the signature definition of insanity. Because we continue to do the same things over and over again, we take 2 steps forward and then a giant leap backward. And in my opinion, that's kind of what we've done in many ways in our country today. 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, and it is driven by fear. The anger, the violence is driven by fear. Because there are some of us who don't like what we encounter in an awakened state. So we want to go back to sleep. And we coin phrases like anti-woke. And if you want to be anti-woke, that's fine. But don't try to impose that on all of the population. That is where we create tension and problems when our zone must somehow be everybody's zone. That is where we run into problems in religion, because some of us insist, especially those of us who are fundamentalists, this is the only way. And if you don't see it this way, and we invent things like the stuff that came out of Dante's Inferno, you're going to an eternal place of torture. You're going to hell if you don't see it my way. And we never think that we preach on the one hand that we were created by a God who loves unconditionally, but if you get mad, he's going to put you in a place of torment and torture you forever. Now, if that makes sense to you, you can take it and hold on to it like Linus holds on to his blanket and like the one who sits and waits for the great pumpkin every year, but it does not make sense to me. If you believe the God that you say is all-powerful, ever-present, all-knowing, all-sufficient, gets angry, gets jealous, gets tricked, has to fight and struggle to get a part of his kingdom back, if those two antithetical things make sense to you, hold on to it. But it doesn't make sense to me. And I like what Bart Ehrman says, chairman of the religion department of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He said, either God is all-powerful or not. You cannot say on the one hand God is all-powerful and then say God has some kind of nemesis that God has to fight with, because that would suggest a lesser God. Why would an all-powerful God have to fight anything? To me, it's antithetical. Why would an all-loving God that is the source of everything need anything? If that makes sense to you, in the Unitarian Universalist tradition, you can hold on to it. I don't embrace it. An all-powerful, all-loving, all-knowing God somehow tripped up and created a being that took a third of his kingdom, and he has to fight it until he defeats it, and likes the sight of blood and the smell of burning flesh. We leave that alone. These idea heroes have shown us that there is more to behold than our eyes may presently see. Do you know how many soldiers during the Civil War, and war is another thing that human beings can't seem to get over. It only produces more warfare. It's a temporary stopgap measure, but we go right back to fighting each other. It's like kids who get mad in the playpen, fight each other, somebody stops them from fighting, and then 5 minutes later they're fighting again. Warfare. We can't just disagree. We're not all the same. We can disagree. But do we have to kill each other because we disagree? We breathe the same air. We live off the same resources. And another nonsensical thing we're doing is we're actually in the process of destroying the very planet that provides for our physical existence. Now, if that makes sense to you, you can hold on to it, but it doesn't make sense to me. Neil Donald Walsh, who is a personal mentor, says this: is it possible, just possible, that there's something about ourselves and our source, God, that we presently do not understand, the understanding of which would change everything? Are we willing to at least consider, not that we have been given wrong information, not that our cultural stories have no value, but that there is more to our existence and the source of that existence than we have been told or that we presently understand? Is there more data in the area of our beliefs? Then maybe even our interpretations of the data we've received has been erroneous or insufficient. I'm a Bible student. I think I've read the Bible from cover to cover maybe 10, 15 times. I stopped counting. Started at 12, I'm 69. But I've also studied about it. And I've discovered, and some will disagree, but you can do the research on your own, that it is not, surprisingly, it's not inerrant and infallible. Doesn't mean it doesn't have value, does not mean that there aren't gems within it, but it is not inerrant and infallible. It's not even historically accurate. And most of it came from oral transmissions. They didn't write 2,000 years ago. Those are stories that were told. They didn't start recording what we call the King James Version until about 200 years after Jesus walked the earth, the 2nd century. And by that time, there were no original documents of a lot of the stories that were told. We don't have original documents for any of the Bible. We have none. We have copies of copies of copies, often written by men sitting at candlelight who could not separate their verbs from their nouns and pronouns. And when they came to places where the texts that they had were incomplete, guess what they did? They just added their ideas to it. This can be studied and corroborated. Does that make them bad people? No, it makes them human, just like all of us. Let me go on and finish this. When we look at our communities, our nation and world, we must ask ourselves this question concerning our present beliefs. Have our beliefs brought us the outcomes we say we seek? If so, we can continue to embrace them. If not, maybe it's time for us to take a close look at them and be willing to say, we misinterpreted something here, we are missing important data, or that these ideas simply do not work anymore, if they ever did. In our world of blatant violence, endless conflict, starvation, disproportionality, repetitive madness, with our embrace of ideas about only the strong survive, the fittest survives, to the victor goes the spoils. And you know, the interesting thing is this, is that the people who make up what we call the 99%, who are always screaming and hollering and stumping about the 1%, embrace some of the same ideas. So it's not so much a matter of getting rid of the disproportionality, is I want to get my piece of it. And until we own the whole thing, we really can't change anything on a continual or permanent basis. A lot of us embrace those ideas. Well, to the victor goes the spoils. The fittest survives. In psychology, they call it the queen bee syndrome. I got mine, you get yours. And while we fight among each other for crumbs, the oligarchy, many of them, well, I've got mine, you get yours. And so hundreds of children die from hunger in a world that throws away enough food to feed multitudes, millions of people 10 times over. We throw away enough food in this country to feed starving millions. We throw it away because we simply don't want to eat it. I don't like that. I had that yesterday. Can't we have something different? And an idea hero comes along and says, the only thing, Mr. Gandhi, speak to us, the only thing there's a shortage of in the world is sharing. Einstein said this, everything is energy and everything is connected. The English poet John Donne said that no man is an island entire of itself, but each man is a piece of the continent and a part of the main. Therefore never sin, for whom the death bell tolls, it tolls for thee. And Dr. King said, we're all tied together in a single garment of destiny, bound by an inescapable network of mutuality. And the preacher from Nazareth, Jesus, said, as you do it unto the least of these, you do it unto me. As I hasten to my conclusion, I want to just share with you some idea heroes who've enriched my life, and some of them you may be familiar with. Idea heroes like Wayne Dyer, a modern-day messenger among us, and author of a number of best-selling books, including The Power of Intention and Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. Dyer said Jesus was not teaching Christianity. He was teaching kindness, love, concern, and peace. And so he said, I encourage people to be Christ-like, not necessarily religious or Christian. Idea heroes like Dr. Helen Schuchman, author of A Course of Miracles, who identified the source of the material as an inner voice she believed to be Jesus, who dictated the text to her. She scribed this fascinating book while her colleague, Dr. William Thetford, assisted by typing the material. And some of you have heard of or may be familiar with her book. Idea heroes like Bishop Carlton Pearson, who became one of your ministers after he said, watching a television program one night, he was watching a documentary on how during World War II, millions of people were slaughtered. And he said, I asked God the question, how can you be a loving God and all this takes place? And he said he heard an inner voice say, oh, is that what you think we're up to? It changed the course of his life. He came from under the mentorship of Oral Roberts, well-known televangelist, had a mega church with thousands of members. He lost all of that because he came up with the idea, very bold, very audacious, very unwelcome, there is no place called hell. And immediately, the establishment said, oh, there's a heretic among us. And he was shunned for the most part toward the end of his life. But one day, when we understand more, I believe we'll celebrate him as a hero. Because idea heroes, I think it was George Meade who said, all new truths initially are considered heretical. Jesus was called a blasphemer. That you make yourself equal with God. And he replied by saying, I simply called myself the Son of God, and you're angry with me? You say in your own writings that you're all gods. I haven't even claimed that. Idea heroes. Idea heroes like my personal mentor, Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote the New York Times best-selling trilogy called Conversations with God, which were on the New York Times best-selling list for 137 weeks, translated into 37 different languages. They have been read by millions, and the testimonies of their impact are countless. He's written approximately 30 books covering over 9,000 pages. So what is this thing about idea heroes that you're sharing with us this morning, Reverend McKenzie? I'm saying that these are examples that we need to begin to follow. We too must become idea heroes. We must be willing to say, maybe there's more to this than we presently know. And look at some of these new materials. Because you know, a lot of us, unless the book is an old book, mostly written by men, it has not much validity to it. But I've got news for you. I tell my students, I think if more women were in positions of authority, we might not have as much of a mess in the world as we do. Because as much as I am a man and I love men to a great extent, we've made a mess of our world. The competition, greed, the violence, the barbarism. I applaud women. You're the majority. And you keep letting men Like one person said, I was in the car with my parents one day, and we were in D.C., and you know, D.C. has a kind of circular set of highway. It's a circular thing. And she said, my daddy kept going around in that circle, and my mother kept telling me, sweetheart, haven't we been this way before? And he said, this person said, my daddy said to her, I know what I'm doing. Well, from the outcome and what we are seeing again and again, apparently you don't. There's more to this than you recognize. And I'm challenging each of us today to realize that there is more data, that there is a larger universe, and that what we have penned and called the sum total of it might not even be the beginning. God bless you.
Extinguish our chalice with these closing words by Wayne Aronson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The path is never clear. The stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone.